There are 7.9 billion people in the world, and of those, only 4,800 people have logged a single minute in an NBA game. There have only been 36 NBA players to be named the NBA's most valuable player, and only 14 of these superstars have more than one. In these men, you find some commonalities. They have traits like dedication, obsession, and single-mindedness. They've given their lives to the game, and it's paid dividends back. But what if I told you there's a glitch in the matrix? There's this anomaly who defies all conventional knowledge, and who not only is in the 1% of players, but in the 1% of the 1%. This is the story of how an unknown and seemingly unmotivated kid from Sombor became the modern NBA's most influential big man.
How did the Berber win the race? You know the shortcut.
Nikola Jokic's story is not an ordinary overcoming story. His story is much deeper, just like his knowledge of the game of the best basketball league in the world. Far from fame, spotlights, and controversy, close to a deep love for basketball that has taken him to the top, and of course, without forgetting what makes him who he is. Jokic proved to all of Serbia that he was up for the challenge. Then he proved it to the world. His essence has permeated every young center of the new era. There is no turning back. The NBA will never be the same. After becoming champion with the Denver Nuggets in 2023, he put the icing on the cake to an incredible story. A story that includes wars, dominance, and hardships. But if there's one thing it doesn't include, it's expectations. This is the curious case of Nikola Jokic, the paradox of how an unathletic big man became the new face of world basketball almost without wanting it. The story of how an unathletic big man became the best player in the league with the most athletic power in the world. I remember everything in the dark and the sirens. It was spring 1999. Nikola Jokic was only 4 years old. He still didn't understand anything about how the world worked. He didn't know if the sirens he heard were normal or not. He was not able to understand that Serbia, his home, was being bombed by NATO. To be correct, it wasn't Serbia yet. It was still Yugoslavia. Eastern Europe was still suffering the consequences of the huge conflicts that took place throughout the 20th century, and the civilian population was still being bombed. It was a long night in Sombor, a small town of just over 40,000 inhabitants in the northwest of the country. Nikola lived in a cramped 2-bedroom apartment that housed him and his 2 brothers, both parents and grandmother. And beyond the traumatic past he suffered when he could barely remember, Jokic lived a happy childhood. Strahinja and Nemanja, his 2 older brothers, were in love with basketball. In fact, Nemanja moved to the United States for the Premier Basketball League years after. But it was they who shared their love for the orange ball with Nikola. However, he didn't see it as his professional outlet, rather as a hobby, as a pastime, as another way to have fun as a teenager. In fact, when he started playing youth basketball for Vojvodina Žižagas, Jokic was a Coca-Cola addict. From a very young age, the center began drinking daily. He claims that amounts as exorbitant as 3 liters a day. And well, he looked just like this. No diet, no worries. I've already warned you that this was no ordinary overcoming story, but Nikola somehow had a gift, and his gift was starting to get everyone's attention. Yes, scouts all over Serbia were beginning to notice the talent of this young, strong but athletic center. Everyone had their eye on him. Meanwhile, he had his eyes elsewhere. But then, at some point in my life, I started to go into horse racing. I just fell in love with horses and their beauty and elegance. It was like a hobby for me. I didn't get serious with it, and I wasn't taking basketball serious either. I was in between both. Basketball wasn't even his priority. He played because he had fun doing it. His enormous size and talent were increasingly striking, but he never expected to go pro, much less become the best player in the world. It was a strange case. His size indicated that all he needed to dominate was to get in shape. It seemed that, in some ways, he hadn't chosen basketball. Rather, in a way, basketball had chosen him. Convinced by his brothers, Nikola decided to make a very important decision in December 2012. That's the date when the center finally decided to sign a professional contract with Mega Vizura, a major Serbian First Division team that would give him the necessary exposure at the national level. That wouldn't happen overnight, though. Jokic had to go through a process of adaptation that would allow him to get in shape to play at the professional level, and for that he had to lead the junior team first. However, his enormous progression soon gave him the opportunity. At just 17 years old, Jokic already made his debut in the Serbian league. That 2012-2013 season, he appeared in 5 games, in which he averaged about 2 points and 2 rebounds in just over 10 minutes of play. It may seem like a slow start, but it's not. In European development basketball, there is no college league. Players who are not even college age have to play against opponents of all ages. Nikola was playing against players who were more than 10 years older than him, or even more than 15 years older than him, and who were making a living playing basketball. There was no easy basket, but he, thanks to his personality, was able to withstand the pressure. And at the age of 18, he became a star in the domestic league. After signing a new 4-year contract in 2013, Jokic managed to find a place in the rotation. He played 2 important competitions, the Serbian League and also the Adriatic League, a competition that included teams from several countries that were part of the former Yugoslavia. In the Serbian League, Nikola averaged 10.9 points, 6 rebounds, and an amazing 3.3 assists per game. In the Adriatic League, he averaged 11.4 points, 6.4 rebounds, and 2.5 assists per night. People no longer wondered if he would end up making a career in basketball. That seemed like a no-brainer. At 18 years old, he showed unusual maturity for his age. He was a center who seemed to have skills that far surpassed the role of a diminished role in modern basketball. In fact, Nikola Jokic's name began to be bandied about in the United States. Scouts from different NBA franchises always monitor the best prospects from Europe. Jokic's performance at such a young age had caught their attention. The Serbian center started showing up in the 2014 mock drafts. People around him wondered if any team would invest a draft pick in him. And he didn't seem to care. Nikola had entered the draft, but he didn't even watch it. His future career depended on many factors, but one of the most important was what fate would choose on that night of June 26, 2014. Would any franchise select him? If so, which one? Would it be a team without big man power that could provide him with minutes in his rookie season? Or would his selection simply remain one of the typical draft and stash picks that GMs used to use as leverage in trades? A lot depended on the outcome of what happened that night, but he was just asleep. It wasn't until the next day that Jokic discovered, thanks to his brother, that the Denver Nuggets had selected him with the 41st pick in the draft.
The Denver Nuggets select Nikola Jokic from Sombor, Serbia.
The Nuggets had been confident in the abilities of this young Serbian who seemed to have some unique qualities. As ESPN aired a Taco Bell commercial, Nikola Jokic became the player who would change the franchise from top to bottom. And although no one could have imagined it, he already dreamed of doing it. However, Denver would have to wait one more season. Jokic was going to play the 2014-15 season at Mega Basket. He wanted to make sure he was prepared and mature enough to arrive in the best league in the world to increase his chances of success. But during that season, he would take the opportunity to convince the Nuggets management with spectacular performances. In his first Adriatic League game that season, Jokic scored 27 points and grabbed 15 rebounds. A few days later, he racked up 17 points, 12 rebounds, and 8 assists. In March, Jokic had another 28-point, 15-rebound game. Although Mega Basket was not one of the best teams in the competition, the Serbian had become one of the best players. In fact, arguably the best. With his MVP in the Adriatic League that season, Nikola got the first such award of his career. But man, if he had only known what was coming. Tim Connolly, the now GM of the Minnesota Timberwolves, who has managed to elevate the franchise to the best moment in its history, was in charge of basketball operations for the Nuggets at that time, and he was eager to get Jokic to move to the United States. Nikola earned an invitation to Summer League in the summer of 2015, and his averages of 8 points and 6.2 rebounds per game convinced newcomer Michael Malone that he deserved a roster spot. That was the beginning of a relationship that has become game-changing. Malone and Jokic would eventually become one of the most dominant tandems in the NBA. But finally, the moment was coming. Jokic was going to start his career as a player in the best league in the world. Without being his dream, it became his reality. Without being his number one priority. Without being his desperation. Nikola always treated basketball with love, but never as an obsession. His genius stemmed from his understanding and conception of modern systems. Something genuine, something innate to him. He had a gift that almost no human being could aspire to. And now everyone was going to be watching every detail of what he did on the hardwood. Nikola was part of Michael Malone's rotation from the beginning, but he didn't play much of a role. In the first 10 games of his career, he averaged 13.6 minutes a night. In one of them, he didn't even play. But there was one game that would change his confidence and his career forever. It was November 18, 2015. The Denver Nuggets were facing the San Antonio Spurs in a matchup in which the teams looked completely different than they do today. The Nuggets starting five of Danilo Gallinari, Kenneth Faried, Gary Harris, Emmanuel Mudiay, and J.J. Hickson was far from competitive. But off the bench, Jokic put up a performance of 23 points, 12 rebounds, 2 steals, 3 blocks, and 0 assists. With 62 100-100 splits, Nikola showed his ability to score in the NBA, and Malone rewarded him with a starting spot for most of the rest of the season. In fact, from that game on, Jokic became an indispensable piece for Malone. His averages increased to 10.6 points, 7.4 rebounds, and 2.6 assists in the 22.8 minutes he played per night in the remaining 70 games of that rookie season. Once again, Nikola had faced a new and even bigger challenge. And once again, he had quickly exceeded expectations. One way or another, by the end of his rookie season, Jokic figured out the formula. He realized that his style of play was perfect for the era that was coming in the NBA. His skill set was something everyone considered special, but his vision of how it would fit into modern offensive systems allowed him to realize that he could become an unstoppable player. And from that moment on, his growth was exponential. Nikola finished second in the most improved player race the following season, averaging 16.7 points, 9.8 rebounds, and 4.9 assists per game. In his sophomore year, the Serbian was already the second highest averaging center in assists, behind only Al Horford. He was becoming the epicenter of the Nuggets offense. He still didn't bring the ball up, but his touches began to progressively increase over time. Malone was giving him more and more importance in the scheme, which was being fed back by a performance that was looking more and more impressive. The two were beginning to understand each other. And finally came his explosion. It was the 2020-2021 season, and Jokic had begun to play pure point center. During the past playoffs, Denver had proven to be among the West's elite, reaching the conference finals in the bubble. At that point, the Lakers of LeBron James and Anthony Davis were able to handle them. However, Nikola was ready to step up to the next level. Averaging 26.4 points, 10.8 rebounds, and 8.3 assists per game, the Serbian became the undisputed regular season MVP. But in this league, with one superstar, it's never enough. Jamal Murray suffered an ACL injury in April 2021, which kept him away from the courts for almost 18 months. Without his trusty squire, without his second offensive reference, Jokic and the Nuggets' chance of advancing to the next round dropped precipitously. True, they had the tools at their disposal, and Mike knew he was coaching a winning team. But fate would not let them play a healthy postseason. But their luck finally changed in 2023. That's the year. That was the season that established Jokic as a generational player. His play had always been criticized by many skeptics. They argued that with the increased intensity of the playoffs compared to the regular season, he was never going to be able to win. They said his game didn't translate. They argued that his defense was well below average and it was hurting the team. But that year, no one could say anything else. Jokic fell just short of the MVP during that regular season to Joel Embiid, but he accomplished something much more important. By beating the Minnesota Timberwolves, Phoenix Suns, Los Angeles Lakers, and Miami Heat, the Nuggets posted a record of 16 wins and 4 losses in the playoffs. The first team to achieve a 75% winning record and win the ring since the San Antonio Spurs of the 2007 season. Their superiority and revolutionary style proved that no defensive system was capable of stopping their team. His ability to be at his best in the most important moments proved that his mentality was on par with that of a generational player. Jokic was no longer an MVP caliber player. Jokic had become the best player in the world. But the question is, what is his secret? How has Nikola been able to reinvent basketball in a way that no player would have been able to even imagine? Why has this center born in a small town in Serbia been able to dominate superstars coming out of the best coaching systems in the world? The answer is easy, and it is because of his vision of the game, because of his pure conception of basketball. Nikola Jokic is not only the best passing big man in NBA history, his vision of the game goes far beyond that. Jokic is not only able to sense the position of all his teammates at all times, he's able to anticipate what is going to happen next. His ability to generate advantages in the half-court offense is reminiscent of only one player, and that is LeBron James. Very few centers have been able to have a real triple threat in their arsenal, and very few centers have been able to score with solvency from all 3 levels. Nikola has both skills at the same time. That has made him one of the most impactful offensive juggernauts in league history. During his 2023-2024 season, Jokic has finally surpassed Wilt Chamberlain's record for a center in assists during a single regular season. His 708 assists are the most by a center in a single season in history. But the stat that really puts his vision of the game into perspective is this one. There have been 9 seasons in which a center has surpassed 500 assists. Well, Jokic has 6 of them. Only Domantas Sabonis and Wilt Chamberlain twice have been able to do it. His European background has allowed him to understand basketball from a much more tactical point of view. Like many of the best passing centers in history, Jokic's experience before coming to the United States helped him understand the game in greater depth. His profile, influenced in part by the profile of other centers such as Joakim Noah or Marc Gasol, allowed him to become a high-post hub almost from the start. Able to receive at the top of the key and generate advantages for his teammates like the Frenchman and the Spaniard, who with their passes and screens were able to run the offense. But Jokic has gone much further. From the low post, from the high post, in transition, after a defensive rebound, if there's an advantageous situation, Nikola will always find it. Their vision of the game has brought about something that was unthinkable for a center. Throughout the history of the league, the best defenses have been able to reduce the production of the best big men in history thanks to a resource. Logically, the first thing is to have a defensive center who is a good matchup in weight and height. But the second step to slow down the dominant big men is to throw another defender on top of them. Double teams have allowed you to somewhat control their production, but Jokic is different. If you send him a second man, he's going to find the open teammate. In any situation and in any context, you're throwing yourself under the bus if you even try. Just like they say, the best offense is good defense. One of the best ways to score is to be an excellent passer. It doesn't make sense until you realize it's true. The dual threat has been one of the tools that the best offensive players have used during their reign. Being a good passer makes defenders much more hesitant to create 2-on-1 situations. Larry Bird, LeBron James, James Harden, these players were or are capable of leading their team in both scoring and assists, night in and night out. That's why they're the most ideal profiles to run the offense when the rest of the pieces of the team can't create much scoring on their own. However, we've never seen a center do this before. Why is Jokic the first of his kind? Basically for 2 reasons. The first is that the current NBA context is the right one for this type of play style to explode and dominate the league. The three-point revolution and the spacing era allowed players to be much more dangerous in any type of situation. Stretch big men went from being an exception to being the norm. Players of enormous size who are able to get away from the rim and still be effective offensively. That was the first step, and this process began more than 2 decades ago. In addition, the growing explosion of talent that the NBA is experiencing has allowed the big men to multiply their bag and their offensive resources, being able to put the ball on the floor with confidence. The second reason is simpler, and it is that since this has happened, no center with the court vision of the Serbian has emerged. That's really why he is unique, but that ain't a surprise, right? It is difficult for coaches to trust a method that has not been tested before. Only the most imaginative and creative minds can do that. Maybe Michael Malone is the only coach who would have thought of having his center become the offensive playmaker. Or maybe any coach would have done it with such enormous talent on his roster. But the truth is that without Jokic, basketball would not be the same. Think of Domantas Sabonis, think of Alperen Şengün, think of rookies Victor Wembanyama or Chet Holmgren. They all have something in common. They all have the skill set of a perimeter player, and they all know how to pass the rock. All of them have emerged after the Jokic revolution. As a scorer, Nikola is absolutely elite. His greatest attribute, as we've said, is his ability to shoot from anywhere. He's an efficient player from the three-point line, from mid-range, and from the paint, thanks to his enormous strength and physicality. He can score from the low post, from the high post, catch and shoot, off the dribble. There's no situation where he is not effective. His footwork is elite. First for his patience, being able to find the best moment to shoot thanks to his good balance. And then thanks to more advanced moves like his characteristic Sombor shuffle. Yes, this move patented by the Serbian that is a mix between a sidestep and a step back, and that he's able to get over even the longest defenders in the NBA. It seems unorthodox and sometimes even unnatural, but he knows what he's doing. His arsenal is not the most aesthetically pleasing, but it is one of the most effective in the entire league history. Another aspect that makes the Joker special is his mentality. It is common to hear that people from Eastern Europe are tough. Certainly, we've had a few examples in the NBA. And the reality is that Nikola comes from a family with a special character. His older brothers are the perfect example, having already been involved in numerous violent altercations. But no, there are few occasions when a player like him is going to be intimidated. There's a belief that Jokic is a bit passive, but he is clearly not. No player with that trait would be able to reach the elite of any sport. But it is true that the center lacks effusiveness. Well, at least in his 9-to-5 job, which is the NBA. In Serbia, it really is a different story. We've seen this lack of emotion on many occasions, but somehow that is his best ally. That lack of emotion leads in its own way to a lack of pressure. And Jokic has been able to perform at his best when the pressure was at its highest, when the stage was at its hottest. This conglomerate sums up what his essence is. His court vision, his scoring ability, and his mentality are the three aspects that make him a unique player. So unique that his influence on the game has already become apparent. I said it at the beginning, the NBA will never be what it was after his time in the league, and I have evidence to prove it. 2 decades ago, the game was completely different. The average talent in the league was much lower, and on many occasions, it was the best defenses that ended up winning championships. There wasn't as much threat and there wasn't as much space. That's why Mike D'Antoni's Phoenix Suns were one of his first teams to open up the court and take advantage of the space and gravity their players generated. The theory of spacing continued to advance by leaps and bounds. The big men began to transform, as I said before, into stretch big men who could open up the perimeter. The Orlando Magic of Dwight Howard and Stan Van Gundy took advantage of this aspect to surround the center with shooters. They made it to the finals. These experimental systems were proving increasingly successful, and with the right talent, they became the trend. The three-point revolution that occurred during the mid-2010s introduced players who were able to shoot from farther and farther away. Gravity became the best way to generate advantages, and the off-the-ball movement of offensive systems became one of the most important factors in the game. Defenses opened up to guard more and more threats that could do damage from long range. Pure slashers went out of fashion because of their inefficiency. The league was already unrecognizable to fans who grew up watching the NBA of the 80s and 90s, but in recent years, it really has evolved even more. Welcome to the pace and space era. Welcome to the forefront of the league's offensive systems. Here, the traditional positions have all but disappeared. The only thing that exists are defensive matchups. Even some of the roles that existed in the NBA a few years ago are in full extinction. Where are you point guards? Where are you paint scorer big men? Where are you defensive and slashing guards? Everything has changed. Everything is more homogeneous. The skill set of a guard is more and more similar to that of a forward. The skill set of a center is also more and more similar to that of a forward. The skill set of the forward has expanded to the whole game. Yes, we are in the era where all players are capable of everything, both on offense and defense. It's becoming more and more common to see big men running the offense. It's becoming more and more common to see forwards defending the opposing team's best guards. Nothing seems to make sense, but deep down, it does. Yes, welcome to the Nikola Jokic era. Because if there's anyone responsible for this confusing puzzle that the league has become, it's Nikola Jokic. He's the biggest culprit. Well, him and Michael Malone. The reasons are many, and of course, starting with Joker's own profile. If you tell a coach from 2 decades ago that your center is going to be in charge of running the offense, he's going to tell you that you're crazy. His brain would explode into 1,000 pieces. But not only are the centers of our generation capable of bringing the ball up and running the offense, but one of them has proven that it's the most effective way to play basketball. The NBA has truly become a dystopia. But it is Mike Malone's conception of basketball that has turned the NBA into such a puzzle. Nikola's atypical profile complements Jamal Murray's bizarre point guard profile to form the league's most unstoppable two-man game. Because Murray is really a combo guard who's capable of playing on and off the ball. Aaron Gordon is another completely foreign player by the standards of a couple of decades ago, but he's a perfect prototype for the modern NBA. A specialist from the dunker spot with the ability to stretch the floor on offense. With the handles of a guard and spectacular defensive versatility. Or Michael Porter Jr., a fearless scorer who has one of the highest release points anyone has ever seen, and who has been able to turn his purely defensive game into effective play on both ends of the floor. In some ways, the Denver Nuggets are riddled with unicorns. But that's the cog that makes it all work, the glue that allows the team's play to be as homogeneous as it is potent. That's Nikola Jokic. Without him, the Nuggets are a below-average team. With him, they're a team that just can't lose. The pace and space era has only one owner. It is unthinkable that one player could be more effective than Joker, more dominant than him. It is impossible to imagine a profile that could better the contribution of one of the greatest minds in the history of the sport. Nikola Jokic continues to prove season after season that nothing and no one can stand in his way. In his mind, everything has a counter. Everything has an answer. Somehow, he has solved basketball. Jokic has caused the NBA to become a big man's league again. And there is only one player that can take the throne away from him. After reconverting the center position, the classic limitations of the role no longer exist. Centers are no longer that big, undersized, underskilled players that inhabit the paint. Thanks to Jokic, centers can do anything. I have given examples of how his influence has helped players like Şengün, Sabonis, Wemby, or Holmgren to expand their role in the NBA. The truth is that we have to get used to the fact that we are going to see more players like them. The fact that young centers around the world have seen a player their size do everything on the court has allowed them to gain the confidence to add these aspects to their game. And in the event that all players are capable of doing everything, there are some who will have an advantage. Every inch matters. Centers are going to dominate the NBA for decades and decades to come, or at least that's what it looks like. Small players came back into fashion because they were able to do things that no one else could do. The skill set of players like Allen Iverson or Kyrie Irving has made their size secondary because they were able to produce like a superstar.
Three-pointer, bang!
But when this skill set gap starts to get narrower and narrower, their presence on the court stops compensating on most occasions. Of course, there are tremendously talented guards who are capable of surviving any era, and in the NBA, there are currently at least a few dozen of them. But they may eventually become the exception. Wembanyama threatens to become the next generational player, not because he has the best skill set anyone has ever seen, although as a rookie he's really impressive, but because the relationship between his skill set and his size is so absurd that it doesn't seem that any player will be able to stop him. Without Nikola Jokic, his game would not look like it is. Without him, Wembanyama would be a completely different player. It's amazing to see how that kid from Sombor who drank 3 liters of Coke a day has become one of the most influential players in basketball history.
I just want to thank you guys for all the support, not just this year, through all 6 years that I was here, but this trophy is not mine, it's all of these guys over here, so I wanted to cheer you for them. Thank you.
Not because of his actions off the court, not because of his charisma, not because of his presence, just by pure play. His style has marked a before and after in the history of basketball, and no center will ever be like before. Every young big man will see the Serbian in his mirror and will push the frontiers of a position that a decade ago was marginalized. That kid from Sombor, he really changed everything.